Hey, everybody. I am Barbara Lang, and I'm pleased to welcome you to Barbara's Banter. And this will be the last edition, the last episode for 2021. And what a year it has been. Rather than have outside guests today, my co-host Brian Boyer and I just thought we would banter with each other, and I think we both have a lot to say. We want to talk about this year and all the podcasts that we've had, all the guests that we've had on. There's some things that we'd like to explore more, and then we want to talk about next year and what are the challenges, many of them political challenges, that we will face for 2022. So, Brian, are you ready?
I'm ready. As I said before we came on here, I'm caffeinated, so I feel good. My biggest challenge right now is I have major construction going on outside here. So I'm listening to you, and I'm hearing my street go. They're smacking the street up and putting in pipes. I don't even know what's going on now.
Well, you know, the back of my building is on Wisconsin Avenue in Washington. I think I've lived here 2.5 years now, and I think there's a jackhammer that's going on every single day. It's just part of my life now, so I'm used to it.
That could actually be someone's alarm clock. You never know. Maybe that's a new that'll wake you up for sure.
Yeah. Well, you know, we've had some great guests on this year, and we've explored some terrific subjects. And I'm going to kind of read the list of them a little bit, and then we'll kind of maybe talk about what our favorite ones are, or perhaps ones that we want to explore more that we didn't, time just cut us short and we didn't have enough time. So we started with Culture Change by Dr. Tony Smith. We talked about our personal health and the things we ought to be doing to take care of ourselves with Roberta Wenchel-Housen. We talked about matters of race with Dr. David Rennick of National Presbyterian Church in Washington. And then the second part of that was race equity in the workplace with Maria Johnson Sakala. We did talk about Women's History Month, the month that we were celebrating that with President of Trinity University, Pat McGuire. We had 3 guests on to talk about customer service, because that's such a big topic, and particularly in the 2 years that we've been locked down in COVID. And one of our guests on that was Kathy Hollinger, who is the CEO of the Restaurant Association. We talked about COVID's impact on the nonprofit community with Stacy Stewart, and tourism and hospitality with Elliot Ferguson of Destination DC. And finally, last month, we talked about workforce preparedness. We hear so much about not having enough people to hire. And so we had Dean Wilburn of Howard University and Michael Finney from Miami Economic Development. So that's kind of been our year in review. So were there any subjects, Brian, that that resonated with you, that you wanted to have more time to discuss?
All of them, to be honest. Seriously, it's funny, Barbara, because as you kind of go through that roster of guests and topics, kudos to you and this podcast, because I don't think you can go through any of those topics and say that's not important or this one's more important than the other. They're all great topics. They're timely. Certainly, I think maybe 2 of them, if I had to pick 2, because they're all great. Certainly health and wellness. If you're not healthy and you're no good to yourself, you're no good to your family, you're no good to your job. We talked about I'm vaccinated. I had COVID, even though I got vaccinated. So I, really realized how important health is. And then the race piece also, that race piece, diversity in the workplace. I think that also, you can tie that into the Women's History Month as well.
Sure.
Inclusion in the workplace. I think those are probably 2 of the ones, that stood out to me. Again, if you can have all the money, you can have the leadership skills. If you're not healthy, Barbara, as we all know, right? Certainly you can't function and you can't be successful. So I think that's important. And then race in the workplace has been a hot topic for society, for us, obviously, for everything that we've talked about. I think that kind of goes across all channels as well. What were your thoughts on on
You
some of your
know,
comments.
I did, and I did my 2 miles this morning, so I've already been out to do my
Good for
walks.
you.
I'm still trying to stay healthy, though I will tell you, some days it's hard and hard to get up and get out there. But the weather is beautiful. It's going to be 50 today, and the sun's shining. So I went out and did my walk. So that one was also very important, and then to talk to her about how it should be approached in the workplace. I think of all the topics, one of the ones that I would love to explore more, just because it's an issue that we can't seem to solve, and people are so uncomfortable to talk about it, and that is the matters of race. And you know, we did a two-parter. We did the first part with Dr. Rennick, and he gave us a lot of history going back to his roots in the UK, or he's really from Scotland, and talking about how the whole matters of race started. And it really started as a class system, if you remember that discussion. And then we talked a lot with him about why he chose to bring this as a major issue in his church, which I'm a member of, and is a predominantly white church, and why he thought it was so important that the white church step up and deal with this issue. So I give him all sorts of credit and kudos for taking this on. And in fact, he and the session of the church have issued a statement on race that is on their website that is really very good. I mean, I think they feel they have a lot more work to do, but it really is a starting point. And we have, this is a subject that is so uncomfortable for people to talk about. And the bias that exists, whether it is the unconscious bias or consciously biased. You know, you know, that's a big deal in the Congress right now, and with the Congresswoman who the one that went on to paint the other as a terrorist because she's from Islam, and it is just how horrible and how mean-spirited we can be to one another. So I think that subject was probably the most telling for me, resonated more with me, because I just don't see a way that we get to solving this issue where we get people on the same page and talking to each other in a very respectful way. So I guess my caffeine is starting to kick in now, Brian.
I think that's more adrenaline than caffeine with that subject. But you had said something that resonated, and we've talked about this a few times on the show and off the show. But you said something that resonated with me that was I think very important, but also disturbing to hear, was that you feel like we're actually worse off now than when you were growing up. As someone who grew up in the South as a woman, as a female of color.
Yeah.
And I think that was actually, you know, even a wake up call for me, just to, you know, to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
Yeah, you know, I think you're right, and I do feel that way. And I grew up in the segregated South in Jacksonville, Florida, and where, you know, the Ku Klux Klan was out, but you know, they were all in hooded robes and hoods, and they came out at night, you know, for the most part. Today, there's no shame, or people aren't hiding their prejudice. It's all out there for you to see and talk about and to feel. And so I feel a lot more threatened today than I think I felt when I was that little girl riding on the bus when I was 8 or 9 years old. So it is a different time. And then, you know, my daughter and I often talk about this, and we say, so if we have to leave this country, and I've thought about that many times, where do you go?
Right.
And the challenge is that there are very few places that aren't experiencing some kind of turmoil. And the far right and the far left, and it all stems many times to the political turmoil that gets into the matters of race and equity and all. And we talk about it. We said, well, we don't know where we would go. Whether you drive to Canada, you can drive to Canada. You don't have to get on an airplane. But Canada also has had some challenges as well. So it's a challenge and a problem. And you would think by this time in my lifetime, we would have seen a lot of changes. We had an African-American president, and people mistakenly thought that we have arrived, this is over. No, it's not. In fact, it's even worse, I think, than before Barack Obama became president. And so I'm not sure I'm smart enough to know what the answer is, Brian, but
I don't think anyone has the answer. Otherwise, we'd be in a better place now. But you raise an interesting point, Barbara, because it's almost as though, the term nationalism, right? And all that. And it's almost as though people are proud sometimes to be racist. And again, there's a difference between having pride in your country and being racist. So we need, obviously you can distinguish that. I'm proud to be an American, but I'm not a racist. But to your point, it used to be almost hidden when you were growing up. And I remember when I was growing up, it was almost hidden. Now, again, it's so out there, and people are actually proud of it.
Oh yeah, they take it as a badge of honor.
It's like a badge of honor, which is so disturbing on many levels. But I don't. So I guess my question, I would ask this question. I don't know the answer. Is that almost a good thing? Because I know you said you feel maybe almost threatened, which is obviously not a good thing. But if these people are out there, these people who are, they're racists, they're ignorant, if they show their true colors outwardly, if they're transparent about it, does that open up a dialogue, or does that allow us to call them out and say, here's the cancer that we need to clean out here? And does that almost open a dialogue, though, because they are out there and they are showing their face, and we kind of know what their profile is now a little bit? I don't know. I'm simply suggesting that maybe that could be the case.
But I think it's always good to know where people stand.
Right.
And so that's always a good thing. Whether it shows itself by having meaningful dialogue, I'm not so sure, because people seem to be very stuck in their own corners, and they don't listen to the other points of view, and are not willing to talk and to have meaningful dialogue. And that's the challenge that we had. I mean, and I know we're going to talk about some of the politics later, but I was listening last night to the January 6th hearing, and where they were contemplating, and they did vote to hold Mark Meadows, the president's former chief of staff, the former president's chief of staff, in contempt of Congress. And the interesting thing was, all the news outlets was playing it, except Fox News, and the other far right. And so the people that needed to see and hear all these text messages that were going into the White House and here aren't hearing it, because those outlets aren't showing it, aren't debating it at all. And you've got so many people that's the only outlet they listen to. They don't listen to the major networks or to CNN or MSNBC. They only get their news there. And if that outlet is not showing what's going on, I mean, this was history last night, and it was only about 30 minutes long, the hearing, but it was so meaningful. And you said, oh my God, what did they do? When you see all the text messages and that members of Congress were calling in, and so if you're not willing to listen to other news that you don't necessarily like, but you need to know what's going on, I don't know how you reach those people.
Well, you're right, and I think that's, we've talked about media too, right, and the influence that media has, and not just mainstream media. but media that's kind of off the beaten path a little bit. And then of course, social media, you hear about all the scary influence that, Facebook can have. We've heard about interference, right, from other countries, there's all that out there. But I find it to be very, very disconcerting.
It is.
That, people are, again, people will they hear what they want to hear, and their views will fit their narrative of what they're hearing.
Right.
So, and facts, I think facts have become obsolete. I remember having conversations with people, growing up, even a little bit older, and there were actually facts, like it was right and wrong. Now, facts are so skewed for personal agendas, and nobody can question. I know there are fact checkers out there and things of that nature.
But that's not what people hear. They don't hear the fact checkers.
Well, exactly, and it's both. And it's both sides. I'm not saying it's just one side.
Mm-hmm.
If a leader, a lawmaker gets up and starts spewing out numbers, right, statistics, do people really go and search that on the internet and find out if that's true or not?
No.
I don't think they do. So how do we know? How do we even know what is a fact versus what is a false narrative of what's out there?
We're not a curious people.
We're not.
And we're lazy. We really are quite lazy. And we don't go and search to see what is real and what is fiction. And that's that, and sometimes I say, are we this are we as a people this stupid? and I'm sure I may get some pushback on the podcast for saying that, but that's how we appear to be. That
well, ignorant. It's ignorant, and the thing is that some people, there are plenty of people that want to learn. They want to hear other people's points of view. We're not saying that there's no one out there that does that, but there are some people that are very content being ignorant, because if they, God forbid, they were to learn about somebody else's background.
Right.
God forbid that, a white nationalist found out that there was an African-American person of color, right, who was actually more American than they might be. That would destroy their whole point of view on everything.
Yeah, and I mean, they don't want to know that.
They don't want to know it. Exactly.
They don't want to know that. And there's a view that African Americans and or people of color generally, whether it's the Latino population or Asian Americans, that somehow these people coming into the US, if they're immigrants, I've been here all my life, so I didn't come from any place else, right, but that we are taking something away from them, the white people. And that's not true. But that's how they're feeling, that the browning of America is somehow taking some advantage, something away from them. And that's why they're fighting. That's why they're so angry. I mean, that's it. They're so mad and so angry at the world. And I don't know how, Brian, how you get beyond that. I don't know how, until these people die, I don't know how you get beyond that.
Well, usually a cure for ignorance is, education and awareness, but you still have to be willing to listen to other points of view. And if you really think about it, it's so absurd that somebody would dislike someone. I know this sounds like very, very much on the surface, but I know plenty of people of various backgrounds, of various, when I say backgrounds, family backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. I know some nice people on all sides, and I know some people who are nasty people on all sides. To me, it's not, you're not any less, you're not, if you're a miserable person, right, you're a curmudgeon, it doesn't matter what you look like. You are what you are. And I know plenty of people who are very nice people that are Asian, have Asian descent, that are people of color. I know Caucasian people that are also, very nice, I also know miserable people who are Caucasian, who are people of color. I think you're allowed to say that, right? I mean, if there's a person that that's of color, they're not a nice person, I think it's okay to say that, not because that's their color, but they're just not a very nice person.
Right.
And it's just, you see what I'm saying? So it's ridiculous that you would judge somebody simply based on where their ancestry, came from, or it's absurd. It's just, people don't look deeper. It's so much on the surface that's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I just don't know how we solve that. I really don't. And I am just so concerned that we may be headed at some point for a civil war if this goes on, if this continues, this vitriol that we see every day, and the various states are attempting to disenfranchise people of color from voting. And I know we'll
Right.
talk about some of the issues for next year, but that's how their racism is showing. If they don't feel that they can win honestly, then they're gerrymandering and doing all things to suppress the Black vote and the Latino vote. And that's not the America that we should all love and hope. And we can all debate ideologies and policies, and that's good, because usually when you debate things, you come out with a better product by listening to the other side.
Right.
At least that's certainly been my experience in business, that you take a little bit from here and a little bit from there, and you come up with something that really is very good. Sort of like, making a stew, a pot of stew. You put everything in the refrigerator in that stew, and you come up and you've got a marvelous dish at the end. But so many people in America don't feel that way. And they have, it seems like, the biggest bullhorn I dare to think. I don't think that the majority of American or white America feels that way, but nevertheless, the ones that do cause so much chaos that it makes you think that this is the way America is. And I don't know how you get beyond that.
I think it's like that in all aspects of society, the workplace, sports and entertainment, politics. It oftentimes the loudest voices are the ones that you least want to hear. And we've talked about this too. There's one of the things that I have found is that there's such a lack of, and I'm saying this generally, not even necessarily racially, but there's such a lack of common courtesy and respect these days. I've kind of gotten to a point, and I'm by no means perfect. We all have our biases, and we all have our opinions and things of that nature. But I'm at a point now in my life where I actually enjoy hearing other people's points of view. I may not agree with it, and I don't expect them. I don't expect them to change my mind. I don't expect them to change my mind.
Right.
But I can at least hear where they're coming from. If they present it in a way that has some form of, like, don't just tell me that you hate a certain group of people. I'm not going to sit here and listen to that. But sit here, and if you want to tell me that you feel like people of color are taking, jobs from white people, I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear why you think that. I completely disagree, and we're probably not going to be friends after the conversation. But let me at least hear where you're coming from. I mean, let me at least hear it, and I don't want to say understand it, but at least hear it, and then you can listen to my point of view, and then let's come to at least hear each other, even if we don't necessarily agree at the end of it.
Right.
But I don't think we're at that point. I think the only conversation that people want to have is if they're trying to change other people's minds. And the reality is, Barbara, and you've seen it, I've seen it, most people don't really want to hear what you have to say. They have their own views, and they don't even want to hear what you have to say.
They're dug in. They're dug in. Yeah.
They don't even want to hear it, even if it might actually help them with their argument or their opinion, just because they have another side. Now they can, if they want to argue it, now they can have their rebuttal, right? They don't want to hear it. They just don't want to hear it.
Yeah,
and I think that goes across all aspects of society.
It really is. And when we talk about a podcast for next year, I mean, we may have to do another one on race, because I think there is so much more for us to explore and get hyped about and get angry about, but it's certainly worth the conversation for us to do that.
And you made a good point too, because you talked about a civil war, and you could almost argue that we're in one right now. I mean, look at January 6th, right? To me, that's a civil war right there. And it might not always be a visible civil war, but certainly what's going on right now, not only in Washington, but across the world. But I know we're talking about civil war. But in this country, you could argue it might not be the traditional Civil War that we've grown up learning about in history class, but there's certainly, you could certainly define it as such, I think, at this point.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
It's scary.
It is scary because it's like I just don't know where our country is headed. And I mentioned Dr. Rennick, and he had a book that he bought, I guess, hundreds of for his congregation, and it was by a Dr. John Perkins, a 92-year-old African-American minister. And the name of the book was called One Blood. And so I decided to join. They had little book groups, and we met for 6 weeks to discuss the book. Every week we had 2 or 3 chapters to read, and we would come in and discuss it. And I was probably the naysayer in our group. We had 6 people, and the book was interesting. I'm not saying that at all, but it is from a perspective. And what they were what Dr. Perkins was trying to say is that we need to do racial biblical reconciliation. And the point that I continued to make, and I agree that we should try to do that, but the point I tried to make is that the church doesn't have the big bullhorn. The politicians do. And unless you address that elephant in the room, I don't see how you can get to racial biblical reconciliation. And, there were people in the group that disagreed with me. And then when you read the writings in the book, that would not be the view that Dr. Perkins took. And this man has been on the racial, doing racial issues and addressing racial issues for many, many years. As I said, he is 92 and he wrote this book. He's written many books. This, he says, was his last book before he dies. His wife is in her 90s, and they both have foundations and churches, and they do all sorts of things. And he's committed to this racial reconciliation. I am just not convinced that it can happen unless the politicians, because those are the people that have a much bigger bullhorn than the church has. And that's sad to say and sad to see, because that's the church, regardless of what denomination you are. That was the place you always went to for that kind of help and healing and all. And today, I just don't think they are the place. It's other places that are filling that void. So
they are. And I mean, even if you go on to like social media is filling the void, right? In certain ways, there are people who are, the social media quote unquote influencers, right?
Right.
And this is actually kind of a segue into 2022. But you and I talked about this a little bit yesterday. As far as the leadership that we have in this country right now. I consider myself, I don't want to get too political here, but I definitely consider myself more moderate. I've always been definitely more a little bit more to the left, but definitely more moderate. And I'll be honest with you, Barbara, going into 2022 here, and as of today, I do not have faith in the people who are running the country to make the right decisions to get to where we need to get. I don't want to make a full generalization here. Certainly there are some people that are doing great things. Mm-hmm. But overall, I am very skeptical of the people who have the voice, who serve as your voice, as my voice. We talked about this. I always looked up to people who were in politics. I always thought they were brighter and smarter and better trained than everyone else. And now they're not. There are people who are not in political positions who are much smarter than people who are making decisions that impact our lives and our children's lives. Mm-hmm. We talk about school safety is another one. I have kids in school. I don't love kids are being killed, right? And nothing. And I feel like nothing's being done. I'm sure something's being done, but nothing that I see.
The active shooter drills and all your children, and my grandchild has to go through. Children should not have to go through that kind of thing. No. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
And I'm tired of the prayers going. We've heard this before.
Thoughts and prayers.
I don't want thoughts and prayers.
Right.
And I don't know what I've been having some discussion with friends of mine. metal detectors in the school. I know there's studies that say they don't work. Some say they do work. I don't care what has to be done. There's no more innocence in schools. I know this might sound very cliche. I probably sound like an 80-year-old man here, right? There's no more innocence in the schools. What the kids are bringing home with them, mentally, physically, it's trauma. What they're hearing, what they're seeing, and I'm talking about kids that haven't even experienced somebody walking into school with a gun. There's trauma even beyond the news that you hear and the actual shootings. It's trauma.
Right. Well, because they're all having to go through these training sessions to prepare in case there's an active shooter in your school.
Right.
And this is horrible.
And they're told different things. Huddle in place. Well, if there's somebody walking through the halls with an AK-47, right? You're supposed to huddle in place. You're not supposed to jump out the window or run as far as you can. Again, I'm not a security expert. I'm not pretending to be.
Right.
But they're hearing different things from different people. And again, I don't. That's another big. That's like similar to the racial issue in the sense that there's no real answer at this point.
Right. Well, obviously some sort of gun control where every Tom, Dick, and Harry can't walk in and buy a gun, and some sort of background checks and all of that. And I'm not. I mean, I do not like guns, so I'll admit that. But I'm not about taking away people that want to hunt and whatever.
Sure.
But I don't know that I need, if I were a guns person, that I would need an AR-15 in my home. I mean, that is just not something that you need, but obviously there are people that think that they do. But there needs to be some background checking. People just should not be able, I mean, this 15-year-old kid in Michigan that will spend the rest of his life in jail, as he should, and the 4 kids that are dead, teenage promising young kids that are dead because of this. Is just unbelievable. Or the little kids in Sandy Hook, almost 20 years ago. And these were first graders, 6-year-olds, all dead.
Right.
Or the Parkland guy in Florida. How can we justify not doing anything and only giving thoughts and prayers? That doesn't bring these kids back. That doesn't save the next life at all. And it is just scary for our young folks, our young kids.
It is, and Sandy Hook is, being here in Connecticut, that's about, really only about a half hour, 35 minutes from me.
Right.
I've always kind of felt that if nothing was done after that.
With the 6-year-olds, and yes.
6-year-olds, first graders, right? If nothing's done after that, then nothing's ever going to be done. And I know, I know the people from that community, they're doing the best that they can to try to, lobby. You've seen the parents, the families, they've been on Capitol Hill, they've lobbied, they're doing an amazing job.
Right.
There's only so much they can do, but going back to what we were saying, if our leadership, our politicians, our lawmakers aren't doing anything after first graders are getting slaughtered in their school, which is, school, churches, movie theaters, places where you're supposed to feel safe, right?
Safe. Absolutely.
And if nothing's being done after little innocent children who are there to get an education, right? If nothing's done after that, then nothing. I don't really believe anything could ever be done or will ever be done. If that wasn't the wake up call, because how many times has it happened since then?
Well, and it is so so sad. Yeah, and it just and every time some of our politicians will say, well, now is not to talk about gun control. And now, well, when is the time to talk about this and to do something about it,
Talk about it before it happens. Let's not, and that's another thing too.
Right.
You notice that you see that every time there's a, whether it's a school shooting or a tragic accident, the terrorism or, a plane crash, there's always something that could have been prevented that makes you absolutely sick to your stomach. If just one person had done one thing, an easy thing that should have been thought of beforehand, you would have prevented all of these. Again, not all of them, but a lot of these tragedies could have been prevented.
Well, in the case of Michigan, first of all, the parents and right. Buying this kid a gun and then having it where he had access to it. But when they came to the school that morning, the gun was likely in the kid's backpack. The parents didn't say that the kid had a gun, and the school did not search his backpack.
Exactly. And,
You know?
and this is actually, I have my phone here, Barbara. This is actually very eerie. I just got this is very strange. I just got a text from Sandy Hook Promise, which is Sandy Hook, because the anniversary is coming up.
Right.
Sandy Hook Promise here. I'm obviously on their list. 9 years ago, our children and loved ones were murdered. No one can describe how deeply we miss them. It brings such comfort to know you're standing with us today. Will you please sign the Sandy Hook Remembrance Card to honor our loved ones?
Wow.
But we were, that's weird that we were.
About it. Just talking about it.
I'm wondering if my phone picked that up, or if that was just, that's bizarre and eerie.
It is. Oh my. It just makes you so angry that young innocent children have to go through this, and so much promise. I mean, those 4 kids in Michigan all had promising things that they were doing in school, whether it was football or tutoring, or one was in acting or performing. I mean, such promise for these young lives that were just totally snuffed out, that could have been avoided.
And one thing I do want to also, I'm sorry. I mean, there's a delay there.
That's okay.
No, and the other thing too is, I know we're gonna start to wrap up here because we have about 10 minutes left, but I did want to just say that going back to the whole racial piece as well.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of these, you hear about a lot of these suburban schools where these shootings are taking place. And I think it's important to also make this aware, obviously people are aware that these kind of things are happening, unfortunately, every day. I don't think the inner city or the urban environments often get that same attention. It's obviously happening there, and I know that you'll have people. And again, I don't know all I know there's FBI data and everything, and I don't know all that. I'm not going to pretend to know all of that data. I've seen some of it,
Mm-hmm.
but there are kids being shot and killed in urban environments every day. That's also not getting the same media attention. There could be 3 or 4 kids that were killed today that we might not even know about it in a big urban area. That's not necessarily getting the coverage.
And that's because it goes back to the media and goes back to society, where we don't think those kids are as important. That Black and brown kids don't deserve the same amount of attention. That missing girls, Black girls, aren't publicized,
right.
Or Black boys as well, the same way that white kids or white young people go on. And that's the bias that exists, where things are not equal. And the media does play, I've talked about the media before, but the media does play a real important part in how you guide people's opinions and thoughts on these issues.
And again, that's because those lives are, people say, all lives matter. And I get, you get what they're saying a little bit, but they're not understanding that those Black lives in the city are not getting the same attention. Let's not be naive here. It's not getting the same publicity. They're not getting the same resources. I'll give you a perfect example locally here. I live in West Hartford. West Hartford is it's a very diverse town, but there's some very affluent parts of West Hartford. Mm-hmm. Where my kids go to school is about 2 or 3 miles from Hartford, inner city Hartford. Mm-hmm. The disparity between the school districts and the resources and the success rates, and I've seen this data, I have seen the success rates of the kids that are in my kids' schools, 2 miles away, if that. Mm-hmm. From kids who are 10 steps behind before they're even born. It's real, people. It is real. And listen, we're all working to make sure our kids get the best education they can get. But let's not be naive here. Let's realize that within a few miles of one school to another, suburban community versus urban community, there are more resources, and those kids have 20 times more success rates than 2 miles away over the border in Hartford. Mm-hmm. It's a problem.
Right.
I acknowledge that.
No, completely agree. My husband and I were friends with a white couple for, probably close to 20 years. And this past year or so, that all came to a halt because of the political environment that we are in. And they were over for drinks last year, and we got into the political discussion. And I knew that
Can't do that.
I know, but
Yeah, do that.
I know, but we did, and so they showed their colors, and I knew that they were probably more conservative than I am on some social issues. But the woman in the couple started complaining that our mayor had this Black Lives Matter Plaza downtown near the White House, and had it all painted and yellow. And she was very angry about that. And I said, why? She said, well, all lives matter. I said, yes, but today Black lives really don't matter as much as your life. Well, that's not true. That's not how I feel. I said, let me just tell you, this is how it is. I live it every single day. And I have not seen, since they left here, because our discussion got so intense. We were cordial and said goodbye, but I have not seen or heard from them since, and it's been over a year.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because, again, so we were just to, kind of tie the bow on what we were talking about at the beginning, and how people are more outwardly, I'm not saying everybody's racist, but outwardly their views, they're more willing to express their views these days.
Right.
And it's funny because I always hear people say, don't get in a political discussion because it's going to go down a bad road. But at the same time, I don't know if you feel the same way. I'm at a point in my life where I don't want to be friends with people who don't share at least similar values than I do.
Same values. I mean, we don't have to agree on everything.
Exactly.
But there's a moral compass that I have. And if you don't have that same moral compass, I can't, I mean, and this woman just went on to talk about why would Mayor Bowser do that?
Right.
That just, and in fact, she even was so misinformed, because she said, didn't she write down on the thing, defund the police? And I said, no, that's not what's there. She said, well, yes, it is. I said, no, it's not. Have you been down there?
Right,
it says
right.
Black Lives Matter is what it says. Well, didn't she defund? I said, no, she has never said anything about defunding the police. But she gets all of her news from Fox News. And that's what she's hearing, and not the truth. So, we're not friends anymore. We were cordial and said goodbyes, and I've not seen or heard from them since. And I had thought of them, my husband and I had thought of them as good friends, but no longer. Yeah.
Well, it's probably better to find that out now. And
absolutely.
People, we talked about facts. What are facts? I don't even know what facts are anymore, right? But when it comes to media and we can have a whole show on that, sensationalism, but don't let the facts get in the way of a good story.
That's right.
Right? Or don't let the facts get in the way of your false narrative. Mm-hmm. Just because and here's the thing, okay? It's been a while since I've actually seen a racial incident. Mm-hmm. The community that I live in is, it's not that diverse, but it's diverse enough. And it's a fairly liberal town that I live in. So mm-hmm. I'm not seeing a lot of it. But I also realize that I don't live in a bubble.
Right.
Just because I haven't seen something in a while doesn't mean it's not taking place.
Right. That's exactly.
And you know what? I like it. It's like there needs to be a movement. I understand, people don't realize when they say all lives matter what that really means. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Black Lives Matter at this point needs to, it's a movement. Mm-hmm. And again, there are right, Barbara, there are bad eggs in every movement, right? I'm not saying everybody in Black Lives Matter is in it for the right reason. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying, I think there's some people that say all lives matter. I don't think everyone means it in a racist way. They're just ignorant to it. They just don't really understand what it means, that kind of thing. So there are bad eggs and good people in both sides. Get that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not taking place.
That's right.
You live it. People can look at you and know that you're a woman of color. They don't know I'm Jewish or not. They don't know my background. I'm a white, and I'm white to them. They don't know.
Right.
So don't pretend just because it's not there, you're living in your bubble, especially, and COVID's made that worse because people aren't going out as much.
That's right.
Don't believe
Exactly.
that because you're not seeing it means it's not there. That's naive. It's ignorant, and that's part of the problem.
Mhm.
Barbara, let me ask you this question. We have a few minutes left. What are you excited? So we have about 5 minutes. What are you excited about for 2022? What scares you about 2022? What invigorates you for 2022? We have a lot of shows coming up. We're going to cover all these, but kind of in a nutshell, what are some of your
Well,
thoughts?
the things that excite me and scare me all at the same time, and
Right.
I think that's dangerous too. But I
Right.
think some of the things that I think will impact the business community as well is the political acrimony is still horrible in Washington. It's my local news. It's everybody else's national news, but it's my local news, so I live it here. And I think the political acrimony will get worse next year because we've got the midterm elections in late next year. So I think we're going to see it even worse than we've seen it this past year or two. And we all wonder, how could it get any worse? And the business community will be kind of in the middle of that. It's like we'll be the grass under the elephants that are stomping the grass, and so that's going to be a challenge. I think some of the other issues that maybe we can explore, the whole voting rights thing and suppressing the vote, and that goes back to some of the matters of race issue, but it's a spinoff of that. I think it'll be interesting to see whether the president gets his Build Back Better legislation done. I think there are some things in there that the communities will need help on, whether that's climate, whether it's childcare. There are things in there. I think we do have to be careful that we don't inflate things more, but I think there is a real need for some of that work. And whether we'll get there or not, the Democrats in their own party aren't completely united on that. But I think it'll be interesting to see, at least most of the economists are thinking that it would be a help for the overall economy if that gets done. You've got the Supreme Court going on and Roe versus Wade. And as a woman, that is of immense concern to me. In fact, all women should be concerned about that because it is slowly being undone. And then I think kind of going back to what you talked about earlier around the school shootings, the whole police reform, we can't seem to get that done either. Because we don't want to hold the crooked cops liable. And I think that's the issue, is that they want total immunity from being able to be sued. So I think we've got a lot going on. And on the international front, and it will impact business as well, is Russia. You always have Russia.
Always with Russia.
I tell you, we're going to have, there's still a little fallout from Afghanistan, but you haven't heard very much about that. And they've been slowly trying to get the people that have been left there, out of the country. And one of the big things I think that we'll see what the impact is, but Angela Merkel has stepped down, and there is a new prime minister in her place, and she was the leading voice for the European Union. And so I hope the new guy will be good. But she had been there for 18 years? I mean, a very, very long period of time. And in fact, for 4 years of Trump, she really was the leader of the free world. And it's horrible for us to have had to give that title to her. And then I think the immigration thing is going to be continue, whether what we do on the southern border, going into Texas and, coming in from Mexico. So I think all of those issues will have an impact on the business community, on all of us as just citizens, but certainly on the business community as we move forward. So I hope we can explore some of those controversial subjects as we look to 2022.
So basically you're saying there's not much happening next year? No,
not at all.
No, nothing. But whatever, pick your poison, whatever you're interested in, as far as current events goes, between the two of us and our audience, Yeah, pick your poison, because there's plenty to debate. There's plenty to discuss. There's plenty of content out there. There's 24-hour news cycle. And Barbara, I just want to say to you, as we enter the holiday season, health and happiness to you, your family. It's been a fun ride. Working with you and co-hosting with you on the show. It's been a great show. We've had great guests, great content, and we're going to cover a lot of these topics in the new year. So I would urge people to stay tuned. Langstrategies.com. You can find the podcast right on there. Barbara has a book out. You can go on there and find the link to the book. There's a lot of excitement going on. A lot going on for 2022.
Absolutely. It is, Brian. It's been an eventful year with COVID and the challenges for the economy, the ups and downs we've all experienced. And the economy, surprisingly, with all of this, is doing pretty well. In fact, unemployment is as low as it has been in 50 years or so. But I think COVID is going to be with us for a while. We're going to have to learn to live with it and just continue to be safe and work ourselves around it. And so it has been a joy having you as my partner this year. And we thank our audience for being with us this year as we tried out, and this was something new for us. We tried out this new podcast. So from Barbara's Banter, from Lang Strategies, LLC, and from the Boyer Group, we wish for all of you the happiest of holidays, and we look forward to seeing everybody in the new year. Please stay safe, everybody. Bye-bye.